All right, folks, welcome to part 2 in our code series talking about our Pit Crew CPR 2.0 model. And speaking of the 2.0 model, here is the graph in case you haven't seen it. It is in all of the briefing packets being handed out to the stations, and you can also find this on the TLS training website. So just go ahead and take a quick second to look it over and get familiar with the different positions and the locations of the equipment. Okay, so loading the bases. What are the first 4 priorities that we have to nail down that are really the epicenter of running a code? Well, here they are in order of importance. And again, this shouldn't be new information for us if we're familiar with our already present Pit Crew, our regular Pit Crew CPR model. The first thing is, you know it, chest compressions. If the classic test question, right? If you can only run a code with one person, what would that one person do? Chest compressions. That's what a code is. And continuous chest compressions. So the first provider coming up to the patient is going to assume first base or position 1 as the chest compressor. And before they actually start chest compressions, they have 2 other functions that they need to perform, which is 1, to call out CPR in progress over the radio and open the patient's airway. The second base that we want to load is the pads, also called our fast pads or combo pads. This is where we bring the lightning. So the second provider on the patient, the second person up's role is going to be to first cut the clothes off of the patient, cutting around the chest compressor in a way that minimizes any compression interruptions and gets the pads on the patient to start analyzing that rhythm if it's a BLS model with an AED. And if this is an ALS model or the paramedic is already present, the paramedic will be assuming this second base so that they can do initial ALS rhythm management. This should also be the point where we say that if the paramedic comes in later on in the code, they will be bumping into the second base position, and whoever is in the second base position can then bump out and assume a different role. All right, so quick recap. First person arrives at the patient's side. They're going to open the airway, announce CPR in progress over the radio, and begin continuous chest compressions. Second person up is going to cut the clothes off around the chest compressor and place the pads, deliver shocks as needed. In between rounds of shocks, they can go ahead and place a non-rebreather mask on the patient along with an OPA, and again setting that mask to high flow. Third base or third position is the airway position. And this is a little confusing because up to this point, the first 2 people have also had a hand in helping with the airway. The compressor opened the airway, the pads person placed a non-rebreather, but now this third person is actually the dedicated airway manager. They're going to place a BVM and actually bag the patient, if able, get a high flow nasal cannula underneath, and attach end tidal. And then just as we said that we want to get the paramedic into the number 2 position, we also want to bump the ambulance EMT into the number 3 or airway position. This is because the airway is the second most clinically difficult position, and it will also be optimal for allowing that ambulance EMT to run the BLS side of the code. At this point, we could even make a decision if we're going to place an IGEL or not. Again, leave that up to the senior EMT or the paramedic running the code, how they want to proceed. But the third base is locking down airway. And again, at this point, this is just following old school Pit Crew CPR to a T. There's nothing new here yet. Base 4, this is where we start to kind of use the CPR, the Pit Crew model, but now this is actually where we're modifying it a little bit to move into the 2.0 model. So this is where person positioning around the patient becomes optimal. And we'll discuss a little bit more of that later, but starting off with just the role of the person covering the fourth base or home base, if you will. This is the backup or assistant. The backup or assistant role is to basically go stand or sit basically right next to the chest compressor. And their role is to be able to rotate out with the chest compressor so that they can rotate every cycle if that's what's needed to give them a break. At which point the person who's doing chest compressions and rotates out would then become the backup, okay? So in other words, base 1 and base 4, if you will, positions 1 and 4 can go back and forth, rotating and doing the other person's role. And when the assistant is not being used as someone to rotate in and do chest compressions, they are also next to the airway person. So they're in between the airway person and the chest compressor. They can also assist with airway. This can be suctioning. This can be holding the head in an optimal position for ventilation. This can be helping hold a mask seal, grabbing equipment, etc. So in other words, whenever you are in the backup role, the assistant role, which again might be you coming in the door and filling that role, or it might be you've been doing compressions from the beginning and now someone fills that assistant role, and then you let them rotate into the compressions and you become the assistant. Whoever's currently in that assistant role, you are there to assist the chest compressor and the airway person, and that's why you sit right between the two of them, and it works out beautifully. So then at that point, the airway, base 3, the assistant or backup, base 4, and the chest compressor, base 1, those 3 bases are all right next to each other, just like on the baseball diamond, and those 3 all work together as one unit now. They can all 3 assist each other and kind of move between each other, helping each other as needed. And we now have a self-sufficient, self-optimizing BLS or ALS, but it doesn't have to be at this point. It can be a fully BLS code. We have locked down all our bases. We have ourselves an effective basic code in progress.